Hello and welcome to Spirit of South Australia. My name's Roy Fensom and I welcome you to another conversation with one of the wonderful people that is around Adelaide today. And we will be talking tonight with Frances Billinghurst, who is an author of some note. And she deals with the Wiccan and pagan aspects of the Southern Hemisphere. So we will just call up and we will see how we go tonight. Hello, Frances.
Hi, Roy. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I hope you are well in this lovely, cool, rainy weather.
Yes, winter hasn't sort of given up its grasp yet. So,
No. I would like to see if, I look as if I have dropped something out here that I was attempting to ask. Here we go, I'll ask this. Let me see if I've got this correct. You are an energetic healer and metaphysician of the Isian Center of Metaphysics, priestess in the residence of the Goddess House, presenter at the WitchCon Online, presenter at the Witchfest USA, and author at Moon Books.
Yes, and it's Isian. Isian scent. Isian scent. No, that's all right. I like to have these titles that no one can pronounce. And I'm also resident here on Ghana country, so acknowledging the elders past, present, and emerging.
Very well done.
Yes.
The fact that you have done all of these obviously means that you have well-known reputation throughout the world now.
I don't know about that, but I invite myself along. And I think it's one of the positive things that have come out of the last couple of years, I think, especially the first international online conference, which was WitchCon back in 2000, and where were we, 21, so that was last year. And normally they would hold it, well, they do Hex Fest in a few weeks' time, actually, live in New Orleans. So they decided that they'll do this online event. And it was just off by chance, someone that I know in Melbourne who's a professor and a weaver and an author. I saw it come up on her Facebook feed that she'd been invited, and I just contacted the organisers and say, hey, I'd like to come along if you've got a vacancy. And just a few days before, they'd actually had a cancellation. So as I said, I invited myself along and it's been fantastic.
So now you can claim to be internationally known, if nothing else.
Well, I was internationally before then. I've done a few physical face-to-face conferences in New Zealand, and that goes back in the early 2000s. So I went over to the New Zealand Pagan Fest 2 or 3 times. And so technically, even though I am originally from New Zealand, but I've been living in Australia for much longer now. So technically, yes, I am international presenter, international writer. My writing have appeared in over 40, 50 publications around the world. So, and residing here in Adelaide.
So did you originally come from England or somewhere like that, or you?
No, New Zealand, yeah, Kiwi.
So what sort of tripled the idea of converting the Northern Hemisphere rituals to the Southern Hemisphere?
It made sense. I'm actually initiated into a tradition of witchcraft, which originated in England. So it just made sense when we're trying to look at, in particular, the wheel of the year, which is the Sabbaths, the seasonal festivals, following the traditional or the Northern Hemisphere, say midwinter rites when it's 40 degrees here in Adelaide. Just didn't make sense at all. It did. I mean, some people even now still aren't sure about changing the wheel. I am taking a bit of a step further and actually looking more and more at wouldn't say including Indigenous insights or teachings, because I'm not Aboriginal, and I wouldn't and that we're getting to very sort of prickly territory there and can be very easily disrespected. But taking a leaf out of their book and looking beyond, say, our 4 seasons that we have, spring, summer, winter, autumn, the Kaurna people here had 4. Yet in some parts of Australia, they had up to 6 or 8 festivals or seasons that they'll break down. Some of them only lasted for a couple of weeks. And I think whether you believe in climate change or not, our seasons are changing. Our summers are starting later, going longer. Still, if we're looking at Easter, Easter's still very hot. And so Easter's not autumn at all, not an autumn that I was, familiar with back in New Zealand. Our winter this year, I suppose it changes. It's been very long or very wet and cold. So it's very hard to, when people say, the 1st of September is spring and the 1st of December is summer. It doesn't work like that. Mother Nature.
It doesn't work like that anymore. No. I mean, England is finally getting a summer they can remember.
Yes, I think they're doing a lot of purging, a lot of purification there. But it's like we sort of have like that sort of, and coming from a tradition which is very heavily sort of centered around mythology, all the sacred myths and the symbolisms in there. Even if we're looking at, say, our summers, we have almost like a nice sort of soft summer. Then we have like a hard cleansing purification around February with the bushfires. But there's also, it's almost like the earth goes through its own purification. But and then there's sort of like this death and life aspect, because our Indigenous plants need that intense heat for them to regenerate. So it's really, Australia's very unique, and trying to fit that into something that originated in the Northern Hemisphere is extremely hard. It's almost like starting completely afresh.
And a lot of even the Australian aspects of summer and winter would not reflect in, say, South America or other southern areas.
No.
So the dates may, but the rituals and the weather aspects would be totally innocuous compared to Australia.
And I think what people, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, forget, and this was actually my talk at WitchCon this year, is that Australia is the same size as the US, really, give or take.
Pretty much,
And we have, a climate reach from, the tropics all the way down to, Tasmania. And even here in South Australia, even just in Adelaide, so many microclimates. So, and then not to mention that we've got, what happens in Perth is completely different to what happens in Darwin or what happens in Melbourne. So, or even here in Adelaide. So it's definitely not one size fits all at all. So very interesting. And this is where, especially in my tradition, being connected back into the land and really looking to see what our land is teaching us and showing us, I think is very important, because that also reflects, as we have the saying, as above, so below, as without, so within. So what we see around us can also be reflected back into our own lives as well, and our own spiritual path, regardless. You don't even have to be pagan or Wiccan or witch to do that. It's just any spiritual path, really. It's that reconnection back into the land that we're walking upon.
It's connecting yourself with the earth. It's very important. I'm just going to run your books over the top here so that people, if they're interested, can. I'll just leave it running for a little bit while we continue the conversations. If anybody is interested, either now or in the future, they can just check on these names, write them down, and they'll go looking for Frances Billinghurst and these famous books. Another one.
Yeah, you haven't got
hang on, we'll add that in. We can't have that. We've got to add it in there.
And then I've got
Sorry,
my two
which
little.
one was that? Contemporary.
There's a contemporary witchcraft.
Okay. Oh, I don't think I can spell it. Contemporary witchcraft. Okay.
Yeah.
Craft. It's a good thing I can type. If nothing else, contemporary. Yeah, well, that's what it says, but it's telling me it's wrong. Oh, we'll put it up in any case. That's it. All right, we're done now. Okay, show. And according to the call of God, you've got another one coming up. Hang on, I've got to go searching in here. I don't know. I wasn't going to put it up because I wasn't sure you would start the Witch's Circle.
Yeah, I've sort of pulled that because that's sort of a book I now sort of give when I'm teaching the Witches Circle. But I do have as my two little sort of introduction books. One is the Little Book of Wicca, and that's purely just like if someone's curious as to what Wicca is about, it doesn't have any spells in it or rituals. It just talks about the philosophies, the ethics, why we have a god and a goddess, a divine masculine and a divine feminine, why we have the 8 seasons in the wheel of the year, why we are seen as a nature-centric belief system. So it's a little bit different to what people may be familiar with witchcraft today, because there's so many different labels and interpretations these days. But yeah, so that's why I put that little book out. And then the little book of Lunar Magic is sort of a precursor to my next book that's coming out next year with Moon Books.
See, people, it never stops. This woman is fanatical about this, and she is a brilliant writer. I've read a couple of her books already, and if you have the chance, go looking for these books. They are well worth the effort reading them. I am to believe that last night you had a moon festival, something or other on.
Yes. I've always done this. I used to do, well, back in the day, public full moon events, and I used to always hold them on the evening before because of my tradition and how I was taught. The moon peaks basically as full moon at a certain time, and in order to sort of like make the most of that full moon energy, you really want to work up as close to that peak. And then some people do say that there's a 3-day sort of period of grace either side. I like to work right up to that peak because after, say, it was at I think 11:05 today, and so at 11:06 it's technically beginning to wane. So yeah, so last night there was just a small gathering of people around at my place, and yes,
Rather large. It was a special moon or something last night.
it was
Golden moon or something.
super moon. It's the third that we've had this year, and it's actually the last. So the super moon is because when the moon sort of orbits around the Earth, it does that on sort of it's ecliptic. So it's actually at its closest to the Earth, so that's why it appears larger. So not that you could tell because we get cloud.
If people are interested in taking part or getting in touch with you about these courses, the Wiccan aspects and the moon festivals and so forth, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
I'm on the socials, so Facebook, largely through the Temple of the Dark Moon. It's got its own Facebook page and also have its web page, which is templedarkmoon.com. I do have some courses coming up that I just sort of organised today that I haven't updated the website at. But I'm also on Instagram and have a YouTube channel and Twitter. So I'm a little bit political on Twitter, so it's maybe not a good way to contact me on Twitter. But usually, so if people are on Facebook, Temple of the Dark Moon's Facebook page has all the details and all the website as well, which is said templedarkmoon.com.
Can they get you this one?
They certainly can. That's the the Facebook group for the Temple of the Dark Moon.
Yeah. I'll bet up there quick. Right. Okay, just to throw it into a different direction for a change, we'll put this one up. There we go. I don't know why. I have no idea why it's doing that, but there you go. We will take both of those. If you happen to be at any markets or fairs around Adelaide that Francis is at, you'll find a stall that is marked Luna Noir Creations. And believe me, you should drop by and say hello to Francis at these tables and pick up one of her books.
You can pick up her books, and I will even sign it if people want me to. I call it defacing their books. Luna
Another
Noir.
60 years from now, it'll be famous.
Well, I don't know about that. I have to die first, I think. That's what usually happens. But yes, Luna Noir, for those who don't know French, actually means dark moon. So it's just Temple of the Dark Moon and Luna Noir. And I started, at markets, like an Etsy store. I do beading work in particular, like malas or any sort of prayer beads. I also do witch beads, which are really good for, like, if you want to do spell counting bracelets. I import journals from India, which I like to think are very high quality incense products. And sometimes when I get time, I even make some of my own stuff as well.
So you can see she's not just an author and an international person of renown, she also makes her own books and her own products. So there is no end to this woman's capabilities.
I think I'm just showing my age, because back in the day when I was learning about witchcraft, there wasn't online stalls or be able to buy things. There weren't very many even occult shops around, so we had to learn to make our own things. And yes, and I suppose these days, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a skill that's being lost, but witchcraft seems to be turning into a bit of a business, a mass marketing exercise, being very commercialized. And I think it takes away that personal input. And when you make your own incense products, you really begin to get more knowledgeable as to what you're doing, why, and not to mention putting your own energy, which is the most important thing, into it. And you sort of lose that expectation that everything has to be perfect, because it's often not perfect, and then you find the imperfections or the perfections in the imperfections. And that's the whole thing about the craft or paganism or spirituality as a whole, is the learning experience as you go through the motions.
From my own perspective, I've noticed that I don't want to take away from the fact that there are people out there joining the spiritual revolution, we'll call it, for argument's sake. I'm always happy to see a new brand, from palmistry through to Wiccan through to whatever I can find. But in the last 12 months, 2 years, it just seems to me that there's now more people that are more interested in the money aspect than they are in the spiritual aspect. Have you found that in, like, the Wiccan or the pagan side of it, it's also heading in that direction?
Yes, and it's interesting. Things go in cycles, and this sort of happened back, say, in the 90s when, it would have been about the 90s or early 2000s, when movies like Charm and Buffy appeared. Everybody sort of jumped on the bandwagon. I think it's more so these days maybe it's just the society that we're living in. I definitely have noticed probably in the last 10 years, as I said earlier, the whole perception of witchcraft has changed. I'm more traditional in that I suppose a lot of people still call what I do as Wicca. And in America, they call it Wicca, even though Gerald Gardner never actually called his practice Wicca. But my form of witchcraft is religious, and there's a lot of interpretations of witchcraft these days which have nothing to do with religion at all, and each to their own. Sometimes I wonder whether it is sort of like a response to more orthodox religions that people have had thrust down their throats, and that's sort of their rebellion. That witchcraft also tends to be focused largely, or also it appears, especially on social media, more at what we would call as operative. So it's largely just spell casting or wish casting. So it's more sort of wishcraft as opposed to witchcraft. Whether that's the influence of social media, in particular Instagram. I'm in sort of two minds. Again, people can do whatever they want. That's fine, if as long as they're happy in doing what they want. I do think probably because my training originally was in metaphysics, so I've sort of come from that sort of very spiritual base to start off with. That, and then also with my more traditional training in witchcraft, we were taught that there's more ways of making magic than just spell casting. Spell casting is just one of 8. So when I'm looking at the people wanting to do spell jars and things like that, to me that's not witchcraft, that's actually just magic. And then parts of me wonders, do they really know what they're doing? Because it's all about energetics, it's all about the hermetics, it's more than just putting a few botanicals in a jar. It's about charging and empowering them. It's about learning how your energy flows and what time of the day or seasons, or even taking into consideration all the correspondences, the planetary alignments, etc., etc. All that sort of can add and enhance or take away from your spell, whatever you're doing. And then I see people post everything on social media, and one of our basic teachings was what was originally called in high magic called the 4 powers of the Sphinx, or the 4 powers of the Magus, or the 4 powers of the witch, to be able to dare to know to keep silent. And that was one of the basic aspects behind spell casting, is that you didn't go around telling people what you did, but these days people do.
If it isn't on Facebook, it doesn't exist.
Yes, and a lot of said our society has changed, which is really interesting, and it's really interesting to sort of step back and watch these changes. So to answer your question, yes, I have noticed people appearing to jump on, I'll say, the bandwagon. Everybody seems to be an expert these days, including myself.
But the point is, you are an expert. You're writing the books. You've read the background.
I know some things. I wouldn't say even within my own tradition. I'm learning all the time. I wouldn't profess anywhere that I'm an expert. There's so much to learn.
Would you say that there's anybody in the southern hemisphere that would be more comparable than you at this point?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, I'm having to do an interview with them next week. I would not have thought that.
Oh, yeah. There's. I mean, I go to. Or I have gone to like Melbourne and Sydney to work with people to gain the experiences. Again, this is another thing. Everybody has different ways of working magic, or doing ritual, or even working the craft. And I have sort of been trained in one particular aspect of it, and some people do something a little bit differently. And it's just to gain that experience, even here in Adelaide,
Mm.
again back in the day, so we're looking at about 20 years ago. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit old there when I start talking about that. I would travel, down south or travel up into the hills to work with other people to gain the experience. So you're always learning. No one actually knows everything. And
Well, some of them like to think they do.
well,
The pagan group that is on Facebook, is this a good connection to be made for people who are interested?
is this the Adelaide Pagans?
Yeah.
For Adelaide people, yes. It's one that's been for a number of years. I think originally, again, back in the day, I'm feeling really old, when we used to have the Yahoo email groups. It sort of merged over from that when if
Yahoo!
people remember, I said, I'm feeling really old. The email
Wow.
groups. So it's been around for a long time. It's actually a really good place for anybody in South Australia. There's also, if people are sort of north of the CBD, there's the Gawler Pagans. Now, the Adelaide Pagans did have a side group. I don't know if they're still operating, called PASA, which is Pagan Alliance South Australia. And before COVID, they were having monthly meetings. I don't know if that has resumed again, but the people who are involved or were involved with that do frequent Adelaide Pagans. The Gawler Pagan group meets once a month up at Gawler. It's a very small group, very friendly. Anybody can pop along, have a meal, cup of coffee, glass of wine.
Definitely an invite there.
Yes, and I think it's they used to be big thriving before COVID. I think COVID sort of like
Put
dampened
them
a
on the
lot of
shelf for a little while.
a lot of connections. Things have gone more online. There's a number of online groups within Australia, but to making contact within, say, South Australia, definitely Adelaide Pagans on the Facebook group is probably one of the good places to start.
Why not? Of all the books that you have written,
Okay.
what would you suggest would be a good starting point for people wanting to get into this area of your books?
Ooh, good question. Because I don't really have I haven't actually written the books in any particular order, but and it really depends on what the person is interested in. Now, I'd say to start off with looking at or understanding the different seasons to start off with. So even if they go into Druidry or their own forms of witchcraft or Wicca or just paganism in general, understanding the Sabbaths, the seasons, is probably a good place to start. So I have a first edition of Dancing the Sacred Wheel here because my other editions are out in the room out the back of my place. And so this is the very first book that talks about the changing the wheel of the year to the Southern Hemisphere. And we are sort of sticking to this traditional 8 Sabbaths or seasonal festivals. And that includes the equinoxes and solstices as well. And I sort of talk a little bit of the history from the Northern Hemisphere and how I've sort of adapted it to the Southern Hemisphere. And it closes also a little bit about some of the Aboriginal seasons, just for point of reference as well. So that's sort of a good general book. If someone is more interested in witchcraft, and when I say witchcraft, it's almost like I have to do a disclaimer. My form of witchcraft, which is said, I view witchcraft as a religion. It's earth-centric, and it's also its spiritual path. And that sort of ties in my interest in metaphysics as well, and my love of mythology. And that will probably be contemporary witchcraft. I did write this as the first, basically in 2 parts. The first section is a series of sort of essays on various topics that I used to get asked a lot. And then the second part is it's a little bit more practical. And it's based on what I was taught, where we started off learning how to meditate, learning how to visualize, learning how to cast a circle, learning about the energetics, learning about the hermetic principles, which sort of ties us into why we are here. And all of that might sound really boring when you want to just focus on spells. But if you go through all of that sort of groundwork, you then understand when you cast your spell, you do your ritual, what you're actually doing. So it actually sets you up, as the book says, a foundational practice. And then you can sort of take that away to whatever path you're wanting to build if you want to move away from witchcraft. So, yeah.
Wow, gee, now I know what to look for. I've been reading them all in the wrong order.
Well, I said I didn't write them in any particular order, but contemporary witchcraft, I view it as when you're building a house, if you're starting off, you've got to test the ground first. You do your soil testings, and then you always get concrete and cement mixed up. So cement, I think, is the powder. So you mix that with the sand and the gravel and the water. Then you pour your cement. You got to have certain conditions, and then you got to let it set before you build your house. So you need that foundational stuff first. Otherwise, your house is going to fall over. And that's what I was hoping. Well, that was the vision of contemporary witchcraft, was to provide that foundational training as much as I could in a written form, because a lot of my tradition's teachings are actually oral. And so I said, even if people wanted to turn their witchcraft into more operative witchcraft, or become a druid or a magician or whatever, they've got a foundation that still will set them through.
And now, where are you going to be in the next month or so that people can catch up with you?
Okay, so this weekend on Sunday, weather permitting, hopefully. I was doing rain dances tonight. I'll be up at the Queen of Wands up at Blackwood.
And today, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th of August 2022, just in case you're watching this in the future at some point.
So that's the 14th, Sunday the 14th of August. I'm up at Blackwood. The following weekend, which is the 21st and 22nd, doing a double header at the Gawler Psychic Fair up at the Gawler Racecourse.
You're doing the Crystal Pyramid at Dawn this year?
No.
But
at the Gawler Racecourse, I will be giving a talk on contemporary witchcraft on the Sunday. I think I'm at 10:30 or 10 o'clock, and it's a free workshop. So once you get in, I also will be over at Kadena October, I think, for their Copper Coast Mind Spirit Body Expo. I think so. And September, I'll be at the Australian Wiccan Conference in Victoria, and be presenting on something completely different to my books, and that's it's a rite called the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, which is sort of one of the foundational rituals found within ceremonial high magic that I do. So I incorporate it in my craft. My tradition has a ceremonial aspect to it as well. So those are just some markets coming up, and then I have some workshops. The 24th of September, I'm going to be doing a workshop on energetic cord cutting. There seems to be a lot of people wanting to do this, sort of like reclaiming aspects of yourself back again. In October, there will be one on puppet making. So puppets are little cloth dolls, and you can use them for protection or healing, fertility. You can actually do one for, say, a children's bedroom to keep nightmares away and things like that. So it's very hands-on craft. And also in October, there's an event that I call Gathering Around a Cauldron, which is a semi-open event for people who are wanting to do a little bit of practical working in contemporary witchcraft. And I think these days a lot of people are sort of solitary and don't get that sort of face-to-face contact with other people. So this is a good way, especially it's open for beginners all the way through to the more advanced, and we'll be casting circles and calling in the quarters or the elemental quarters according to the southern hemisphere. And I haven't quite decided yet what sort of ritual we'll be doing, but we'll be sort of talking through some of the practices of contemporary witchcraft.
Oh, what an interesting commentary that was. If there's anybody interested out there, you know where to get in touch with Frances. You've heard the stuff that she's got coming up. And if you're even mildly interested in this, these are some of the books you really need to get into your library to make yourself a little bit more well aware of how these things relate to the Southern Hemisphere. It has been an utmost pleasure, and I would kick you off, but I want to make sure that there's not something that I have failed to ask that you would really like to get out there and make people aware of.
I really don't know. I mean, I could plug my interest in the Dark Goddess, because I do have a couple of workshops or events. Yes, and Call of the God. Now that's an anthology. I'm actually very proud of that anthology because there's a lot of goddess stuff. And I had a friend a number of years ago who complained that there was nothing for men. So I thought, right, I'm going to do a call for an anthology, and Call of the God is the result. And I'm actually extremely proud of that book. There's still very few anthologies solely dedicated to the divine masculine. So I've got a vet and sort of brewing under the surface for next year. One, I'd like to do one on the divine masculine, because I do various versions of encountering or exploring or working with the dark goddess. So I'm hoping to do one on the divine masculine, but that will have to wait till next year.
I can wait.
Well, I'm waiting for men to take the lead and do something themselves. They shouldn't have to have a woman saying, okay, but I do think it's important, especially in our day and age, for women to get in touch with the divine masculine, because the pagan god or pagan gods are completely different to, especially if you're coming from an orthodox background. And I do think that maybe it's just our Western mind. We like to sort of pigeonhole things. And there was another reason why I wrote a book about the dark goddesses, because a lot of people don't actually think of the divine feminine as dark. But it's just how we as humans like to pigeonhole things. Divinity to me is neither black or white or light or dark. It just is.
It's just like the rest of us. It can be either one, whichever one we choose.
Yes, yes.
So have we got through everything, Frances? Is there anything else that you have failed to mention to your public that you would like to get out there now?
I do have a conference brewing for next year. Hopefully, I haven't worked out on the date yet, but it will be on, should I say, earthing spirituality. I do think that there is a need to, as we ascend, as we sort of work or want to align ourselves with the cosmos and the stars and sort of this escapism, and we're all moving out, wanting to move higher out from our physical bodies, we need to actually earth this energy and bring this knowledge back to Mother Earth and remember why we are sort of incarnated in this physical plane. So my idea is to have a whole range of international speakers, including a number of Indigenous people from all around the world, talking about their own spiritual practices and why the earth and spirit, or how they blend spirituality back into the earth. So I'm just putting that up there. I haven't got dates yet. It's
I
a
would
big ask.
love to see some of that. Maybe you could give us a nudge and we can get some interest in it a
Yes,
little bit before it actually happens. Because that
yes.
would be an interesting seminar.
It is, and if I can get the people that are on my wish list, it'll be fantastic. But as I said, I'm still very much in the really early stages at the moment. And yes, this is something that I'm behind the writing, behind the workshops, behind the work and the beading. This is what's going ahead. So I'm wondering I get all this done in 24 hours each day.
It has been no end of a pleasure, and I hope to do this again. So perhaps next time we will concentrate on only one book, and we'll let you pick which one it is.
Oh, or maybe your listeners can have a choice, have a poll as to which one
they
would
want
like.
to hear about.
Yeah.
We will wait and see what comes of that. It has been fun. I will just put you into the library if you don't mind, and I'll just sign off, and
Thank you
I'll
very
come
much.
back to you in a minute.
Thank
It
you.
has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested in being a part of the show, contact us at wellnessfairs@outlook.com and we can send you some information on either sponsoring or appearing on the show. We try to bring interesting people from South Australia. At the moment, we are basically working on the people from South Australia, but we never know, it could go further than that at some point. But please, if you're interested, send us an email. If there's something you would like to see on one of these broadcasts, please send an email through and we will see if we can comply and get somebody to fit that bill. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight, and I wish you all well. Namaste.